Tēnā koe, everybody. Welcome to the 1st October full council meeting. Welcome to the people in the public gallery. Welcome to the staff. And of course, welcome to our elected members and those who are watching on live stream. Council blessing, Councillor Sophie Henford, would you please?
Kia ora, ia mātou e whiriwhiri ana i ngā take kei mua i o mātou aroaro e pono ana mātou ka kaha tonu ki te whakapau mahara hua pai mo ngā hāpori e mahi nei mātou. Me kaha hoki mātou katoa, kia whai hua kia tōtika tā mātou mahi, a mā te maia te tiro whakamua, me te hihiri ka taia te arahi i roto i te ko tahitanga me te aroha.
Thank you very much. Apologies. I know Councillor Coates is on leave. Any others? No? Item 4, declarations of interest relating to items on the agenda.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, yes. I wish to ask the Chief Executive to withdraw the paper under standing orders on the report number 8.1. And I believe that I may, eventually, because of circumstances, may have an interest relating to this agenda, and I would call the Chief. I would like to be noted that I've asked the Chief Executive to withdraw this paper under paragraph 9.9 of Standing Orders on page 30.
Should we address that under the beginning of the meeting itself, as distinct from declarations of interest, Mr. Mayor, or if you'd prefer, I'll answer now?
Councillor Randall, we note that, but I will I will respond to you in the sense that we do that when the agenda comes up. Your
Worship, the Mayor, I just want to say that I do have an interest because in 8.10 annual alcohol licensing report, I'm also the DLC chair. Thank
you for that. Noted. We now have public speaking time for items relating to the agenda. Can I have Rupani Walker before that? May I address the Ngāti Raukawa from Otaki. Kia ko Rupini mi ti tira no Otaki kwa te mai nei ki te whakatakoto. Tō kōrero kia moa I a mātou e tēnei kaunihera kei te mihi atu ki te kato katoa. To you, Rupini, and the group from Otaki who have arrived to lay down your thoughts in front of Council, our acknowledgements to all of you. Thank you for coming and addressing it, which I know is a very critical item of concern to the people in Otaki. Rupini.
Thank you, Your Worship. Greetings to you and the CE and councillors and all staff, and to all the fellow community members here today. So it's agenda item 18 on pages 348, 354, which packages Kāpiti Coast District Licensing Committee Decision 45011-2020, Kiwi Otaki Limited. The wānanga has lodged an appeal against the decision. The wānanga, which is vigorously supported by various sectors of the Otaki community, is appalled of this incomprehensible decision. The challenge for the irresponsible and lax response of the committee, none of whom reside in Otaki, therefore able to walk away and carry on their normal daily lives. In the 19th of May 1840, our ancestors signed the treaty in Otaki, And we find it totally unacceptable today in 2020 to find there's no Māori on that licensing committee, when in fact the demographics of this district says there's a third of Māori population. Otaki is a kaupapa Māori educational hub and is already oversupplied with food outlets as well as liquor outlets. So that's how we've been defined, as a fast food liquor outlet, nobody's place. Well, our DNA tells us it's different. From 1840, when we were migrants from the ancestors who arrived here in 1350 to this area. So cumulative effects still continue to happen to native peoples of colonised countries. So normalising fast foods in liquor centres is not a good effect on our children, anyone's children. So we like to think that our committee who made the decision is supporting bad habits for communities. So cutting to the chase, the Sale and Supply of Liquor Act 2012 provides mechanisms for local territorial authorities to implement local alcohol policy. Staff have advised us there is no requirement for any territorial authority to do so. Well, today I want to stand here and say to you that's absolute rubbish. And remind you from a tiriti or treaty position that's no longer good enough for us. Business as normal is not good enough. As recently prescribed and already alerted to the previous speaker with your school report called the IOR. Martin Jenkins' report, if you don't understand what I'm talking about. So you've got a lot of things to do, dear councillors, and your treaty partner is right here in front of you telling you we've had enough of business as normal. We need to change. I'm not here representing the Māori Party, of course, but that's what we come through. So I've identified the agenda item, our problem with it, and that we need to work together on the LAP and the membership of this committee. So I'm here on behalf as a staff member of the Waitangi, who's an appellant, and the chairperson of Ngā Hapu Otaki. I'm also the chairperson of the Raukawa Marae, and also the Tainui Marae trustees. I'm the chairperson. So I've sent this statement to Tānaka for you to all to read, as form part of the record that we're not happy. Business as normal or as usual, it's got to stop. You've got to think differently, especially with your school report. And we got our eyes on you. So that's it for me. Any questions? Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Rupini, for your submission. Can I just pick on a couple of points? You have stated that staff have advised you there's no requirement for any territorial authority to do so. I think what that means in my mind, in my interpretation of that, is that there's no legal requirement for us to do that, but that's not saying that we can't do it. And you know that in the statement that I've issued to you all, that I mentioned the Law Commission on Alcohol Consumption 2010, which had asked that the communities themselves can demand or advocate for the creation of such a policy. And I see your submission today and the other submissions that may come following you as a beginning of that process to ask us to look into this matter.
Thank you for your dissertation. That's exactly correct. So enough is enough. So we want to enforce some changes how we think together. Now we want to look after our community. I know you're very parochial with your own communities, but no one else will look after us. We've had enough of people looking after us since 1840. We get it? So we want you to help us, to help ourselves, to look after ourselves. So we need to change.
Councillor Compton.
Kia ora, Rupini. Thank you for coming and speaking to us today. I think you made a very pertinent point around the impacts of colonisation. It's something that has a very long tail to it, and you know we're well behind the eight ball in New Zealand in dealing with that. I wanted to pick up on your comment about the licensing committee not having sort of iwi or hapu representation on it. Are you aware, or maybe this is a question that staff might be able to provide us with information on, are there mechanisms to actually include the iwi voice on that at the table? And talking the partnership model you talked about the other day, how can we make sure that that gets included at the decision table, so you're not just another stakeholder in that process, that you're a partner in that those discussions?
Well, Councillor, I've been a quasi-politician for a long time, since 1994, right? And I can recall when the committee was going to be established, had to be CVs, and the criteria was this. We asked and asked and almost begged that, hey, hang on a minute, what about the partnership? Well, and the rest is history, as they say. So it's not that we didn't try, it's just that wasn't the thing to do since 1994. So that's our relationship since 1994, and I've been the quasi-politician since that long. I think my name's on the deed, the original deed. Anyway, so I hope that answers your question. We tried. But that's not to stop us. We've got to do things differently. The school report tells us so.
Councillor McCann.
Kia ora. I'm not speaking my role as the new chair of that committee that you have talked about, but I do note that previous chairs have written, and one I just found before was in a 2015 decision, that work was being done on the local alcohol policy. And the previous chair, I note, also mentioned the need for a local alcohol policy. So it's certainly a consideration that this committee, the council, needs to have a discussion about that, because at present what we have to do is apply the law as it stands. I don't want to preempt any discussions about the appeal, but we have to apply the law as it stands. And one of the ways in which some of your concerns can be addressed is, as you correctly say, through the local alcohol policy. My question to you is have you written over the years asking council to look at an alcohol policy, or has it been requested in any long-term plans or any other forms of communication with the council?
The answer is no. There's been a 1994 quasi-politician. As you know, your agendas are pretty full, so my targets is not necessarily what you're asking me. However, I bet you in 5 years ago you didn't have a school report either on how you conduct business. Okay? So it's all very great saying, yes, we did this, we might do that, we might do that. We should have done this. 5 years ago we did this, but you didn't have a school report then. You got one now. So we're holding you to account. And the rest of the community will hold you to account. Cost us ratepayers thousands, let alone that. But I'm not here to talk about that. I'm here to look at how we can move forward on our LAP. Because perhaps the horse is bolted on what we really want. There's no more outlets in our town.
Thank you very much. And through the Mayor, I assume that that is a discussion that could be started again when the report, item number 810 comes up. Would that be appropriate, Your Honour?
Thank you for raising this again. Well done. And in the last triennium, Councillor Fiona Vining, former Councillor Fiona Vining, did try to get her fellow councillors to support an LAP, but it got defeated. But you have my support, and I will push it this triennium if we can get sufficient councillors to get the council to start an LAP. Thank you.
Thank
Councillor Paraparaumu.
Through you, Mr. Chair, thank you so much for coming along today and raising this matter with us. So the question I have relates to the wider community in Otaki. In relation to gaming machines, have you had better input or involvement in controlling the number of gaming machines in Otaki?
It's a sinking lid. And I'll rest my case. Well, you can't do anything until they disappear. That's what a sinking lid is, as I understand. I didn't come here to give a lecture on sinking lids, but certainly we all understand that in our community they're here until they start use by date. So that's my response, Councillor.
Martin Holiday.
Thank you for coming in, sir. I just want to get some clarity. Is what you're concerned about more in the area of off licences versus just general liquor sale in restaurants or cafes or that sort of scenario? But you are talking about outlets that take off-site. Would that be correct?
Correct, Councillor. I just might add, Councillor, that 2 of our marae are alcohol-free. Been for a few years now. It's a pretty hard ask for our people to become alcohol-free, let alone be smoke-free.
Marilyn.
Morena.
Thank you. And I just want you to know that as a support of the community board as well, just want to ask Councillor McCann, in your role as the chair of this committee, will there be any consultation?
No, hang on a moment. You need to ask the question of Rupini, not cross and ask question of...
You're happy to answer it. I'm just wondering if this conversation is going to go through the community board as well, because there seems to have been a bit of a lack of communication with the community board as a whole about this whole subject.
With all sincerity, the answer is yes.
They don't seem to... You want to... Rob?
With your permission, I'd like to make one comment, is that we have discussed wanting to ensure that there is better sight of applications within the committee. So one of the changes that we are asking staff to make is, rather than just when applications are due and there is going to be a hearing, or at that point, we want a rolling stock of when things are coming in and when they're hitting a different stage, when there's a potential hearing and decisions. Because we recognise that if councillors miss an opportunity to read one document, because it could fall in the week when we've got 600 pages, 800 pages of reading, they might miss the opportunity to raise issues. So we just want to make sure there's more communication around there. That's not changing any of the laws, but it's just making sure that people are more aware. The other thing is, in the discussions we've had, is the need to educate the community about what our role actually is and what the law states and how we have to apply it, because there is a real lack, and I'm not referring to you, but in the community, about what the committee does and the role it has. And part of that, obviously, is the local alcohol policy and what that can and can't do. I hope that may be of some use.
Thank you very much. And that's all the questions you've got. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a great day.
On the same topic, Kiwa Rawariti of the Otaki Medical.
Kia ora, Miguru, councillors, whānau from Otaki. Good to see everybody here today. My name is Kiwa Rawariti. I am the Chief Executive of Otaki Medical Centre. I'm also the Chair of Te Puna Oranga o Otaki. I'm a member of the Central Region Clinical Board, member of the Central DHB Health Acute and Electives Community Advisory Group, and I've come today to touch on the same subject that my rangatira kaumātua Rupine has also brought up today. My first time here, this is quite a daunting process, so excuse me if I'm seem a little bit nervous. But this has all come about because a licensed bottle store has been approved in Otaki, and that has got through, the process has come through and gone to the stage where it has been, the license has been granted with few of us really having an understanding of what was going on in the process that's involved and what we needed to do to try and put a stop to it. So an enhancement of that process is something that I seek as well, because organisations such as the ones that I'm involved with are really impacted by decisions that are made like this. Specifically with alcohol, there is some research around out of the UK and out of Australia that talks about the effect of alcohol on the community being much worse than the effect of drugs such as heroin, crack cocaine, methamphetamines. All of those things have a lesser impact than alcohol does on the community. And I'm wondering whether the licensing committee considers that sort of thing when they make decisions about stuff, or whether they're required to. It would also be good to see in the report, the licensing report, that research has been done into the effect on these types of things on your community before when these things are considered. So I read in the report that there is no LAP, there's no draft, there's no consideration, doesn't say anything about a LAP at all except no. There's a email that has been circulated that suggests that Councillor Coots and other members of the community board are in discussions about Otaki being involved in a wider LAP. So I'm not sure what the actual story is. So it'd be good for either the report to reflect that an LAP is in discussion, at least, or if it is not, then those persons who suggest that it is in discussion should be held accountable for saying such things. But I'm just here because as the medical centre and as Te Puna Oranga Otaki, even as a clinical board and as the other memberships are held within health, we have to clean up the mess that is created by allowing things like this to happen. We know the impact of, we see the impact of alcohol and drugs on our community every day. We don't like it, we struggle to cope with it, and empowering the purchasing of alcohol and drugs in our community doesn't help us at all. So I just want the council to consider those sorts of things, please. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. If you just hang on, I've got Councillor Angela Buswell.
Kia ora, and thank you very much for coming in and letting us know your thoughts. I remember, it might have been last training, we actually had some representatives from the Capital Coast DHB come and talk to us about the effects of alcohol, particularly, and of course that only went up to Pika Pika, and it actually didn't include any statistics about Otaki because you're in a different DHB. I'm just wondering whether, I mean, we certainly sense the impact that it has on different pockets in our community south of Otaki. I guess it's not a question really for you, but for our staff, or maybe the CE or the Mayor, whether we could jack up some kind of formal communications with the DHB further north that cover the Otaki, so we can really see the impact that it has on the health system. Not discrediting what you're saying today, for sure.
Thank you for that. My understanding is when I read the decision and the submissions to the decision, it appeared strange for me because we know that the CCDHB boundaries go just north of Waitangi. But in this case, the regional Wellington Health was providing submissions for that case. So I am not sure how come the Wellington Regional Health Officer was present in the Rohe, which is under Mid Central Health. And that report also said that in the Kāpiti coast, Otaki, in terms of the number of emergency cases related to alcohol abuse in the admissions, was one of the highest in the district. Whereas previous reports that we, at the last triennium, it was Paraparaumu Central of the number of people ending up in Wellington Hospital emergency. So it's a bit of confusion down there, but that needs to be resolved, I suppose, in the discussions. And any discussion about Otaki, we get into this cross-boundary issues with government agencies, and actually it is not a boundary issue, it is an outcomes issue. We don't care what the boundary is as long as the outcomes are satisfactory. And so that's a wider discussion we need to have. I think Gwen Compton, you got a question?
I do. Thank you, Mayor. Morena, thank you for coming along today. I was curious about, you commented about, I guess, the visibility of the process and being aware of how it works and the application and that. I was hoping you might be able to just talk about how you actually became aware of this application for the off licence and how to engage with the process. How did you find that experience?
I found out about this process once the objection process had gone through. So I was actually at a rugby game where the CEO from the Te Wānanga came up to me and said, "What the hell are you doing? Why haven't you followed an objection? Why weren't you there?" I said, "Well, to what?" And in fairness to her, we had been involved in the COVID thing, and we were right in the middle of that. So we were one of those essential services that had to perform right through. So seeing some of those things that probably at that point of time was quite difficult, but I said to him, "I'm sorry, Megan, I missed it. I didn't see it. I don't know actually what you're talking about." So I missed the rugby game because I spent 60 minutes being told off by one of our most significant employers in the region and the leader of Te Wānanga Raukawa, but sort of had to stand there and take that, and had to take it with humility as well, because I did miss it and I don't know how it got through. There were probably a number of ways that information could have got to us, because we do have a community network forum. We do have a health and wellbeing advisory group. We do have a number of other options for this sort of information to be brought to our attention. But that aside, it is an issue that affects health and health organisations. I think there's an opportunity for health organisations to actually be consulted personally. There's not many of us in Otaki as health organisations, so things that affect health in Otaki, I sort of ask that the council maybe contact me or contact those organisations and say, "Here's an application going through which will affect health. Do you want to make any submissions, or do you want to lodge an objection?"
Martin Holiday.
Morena, thank you for coming in, and I do realise how intimidating it can be, having been in that position previously. Look, my question, I've brought this issue up previously. The seems to be the inability to find out who is putting applications in, and also what the application consists of. My question is, what did you find, and I think you've answered it actually already, but would you find it very useful for the community, especially your community, to be able to readily access this information if it was clearly available, if you like?
It's definitely, I think that would be very helpful to the community. I've actually been sitting there, some of those nights when you wake up thinking about how things have happened, whether it's just about the local health process or things like this. I sit there and think that maybe there's an opportunity for us to have on our community forum meeting a board that says applications or things that will affect your community that are going through council, so that we can, don't have to speak to them too much, but we know that they're there, and we can say, "Hey, Marilyn, what's that about?"
Further, we can only just see what's listed as the application, but we are unable to access the information of what the application is, what it's about, any information relevant to it at all, which I think needs to be looked at as well.
Thank you.
James.
Yeah, like you, I'm concerned with any effect of alcohol in the community, or and particularly drugs as well. And being from a healthcare provider perspective too, in the Waitangi area, and I'd suggest, would you be open to even requesting that council ensures that they communicate with all healthcare providers with regards to district licensing requirements, and also engaging their community boards, because I think that's a really important facet, and it would be great to get your support behind that to ensure that councillors hear that, because that's something we often miss out on as a community board, being informed of these sorts of measures, and only unfortunately have to pick it up, or the consequences of it after the decision's been made.
Yeah, so I would support that. Get the issues that people have. We have similar issues where there's no one forum where you can get hold of everybody. So you might take to the community, our community group meeting, and that won't get to another organisation. That might not get you to one on Waitangi. So really widespread communications, and some of that needs to be individually to health providers around health issues, to anybody that's involved in wellbeing. Then I would support that process.
James, can you?
It must have clicked off. From a healthcare, the council is responsible for health and wellbeing components of its pillars under the current government priorities. So, but what I'd really like to see is that healthcare providers are involved in decisions, or informed of decisions that are likely to affect the health of their community, because actually they're the most appropriately qualified, to be honest, to be putting in input. So I sincerely agree with what you're doing.
I think it goes a little bit further than that. Because equity suggests that your attempts to do so should be much more than might be normal. So equity should be driving a lot of this activity as well.
Thank you.
Rob,
Kia ora, thank you. I'm not going to, with the permission of the Mayor, I'm not going to ask a question. Is that all right? I asked a question then. I asked a question, did I? The lawyers in the room will attest to that. One of the things I think as a council we need to come back to is what our legal responsibilities are and what we can and can't do. And some of what is being proposed by councillors may not be within the law, but the local alcohol policy is something that is within the law, and that is a relevant discussion that this current council needs to have, if you can read between the lines of what I'm saying. Thank you very much for coming, by the way.
One of the things we talk about often is that unless we're willing to take risks, we're not going to get anywhere. So I know. Or I do get that, but sometimes we just have to challenge things.
I feel we have talked about this on another subject also this morning. Jocelyn Pravanov.
No, sorry.
Okay.
But I have to ask a question, and I'll just ask a question. Yeah, and I just wanted to point out to elected members that this item has been on our agenda since last Friday, and there has been a very well advertised public forum, a hui, yesterday afternoon in Otaki with the DHB. It would have been great to see more elected members there to ask questions, have discussions, talk to our medical professionals in Otaki. They were there. You were there.
Yeah, congratulations. Thank you for attending.
Welcome.
Really good to see. I'd actually, sorry, for my ignorance, I didn't actually realise that you were a council member at the time. But when I walked in this morning, I thought, oh, that's who she is. She was at the meeting last night. Wow, well done.
That was not why I mentioned it. I mentioned it because the opportunity is there. We don't have to invite the DHB to come and speak to us. The DHB comes to these communities to speak now.
Martin, you got another question?
Well, just again, it's a comment. And this is the problem we've got with the borders. There was a CCDHB meeting yesterday at exactly the same time. which I attended because I had it on the radar to be there. But this was about the whole district. Yeah, unfortunate.
The boundary issue is going to be something that's discussed at many other forums, I imagine, because it is something that is a big issue around Otaki for varying reasons. One of the points made in the appeal was that the public health came from Lower Hutt office, who had nothing to do with Otaki, so the objector struggled with understanding why that was the case. I don't know why it's the case, given that public health have different rules in Wellington region than they do in Central region. I struggle to understand why it came from there, yet the DHB comes from Central. So I welcome all of you to those DHB forums. That's an annual event, but the Te Puna Oranga o Otaki have a quarterly event where we consult with the community about health in Otaki as well.
Thank you very much. But just Kiwa and Rupini, if you can just hang on, and members from the whānau from Otaki Hapu, we are trying to see if we can move the item from 8:10 up the agenda. So while we're doing that, if you just bear with us, I'll come back to you.
Sure.
We've got other issues in the agenda before we come to that.
Shall I sit?
We're now on to members' business. Oh, no, sorry. We've got two other public speaking time.
That's probably helpful for you.
So that we can.
So if we go ahead, it'll be without key staff. That's all.
So we can't.
Well, you can, but you won't have them here.
Yeah. We have problems with getting the staff to move earlier. So just hang on. So we got two other public speaking times. Is
Looks like Mike's left.
Trevor Daniel? And your topic is on COVID recovery. You got 3 minutes.
Thank you. Last night I rang round AIDS Concern and the food and Loretta Jensen's Meals on Wheels to ask about how they felt that the elderly people were standing up, and they had the feeling that there were still problems with older people and their response to COVID. They were still not confident about moving around or anything like that. And I notice in your COVID report, the wellbeing section, there's no really mention of the elderly. There's rightly mention of the Maori, but nothing about older people. And I think there should be something put in there. I think that perhaps a strengthening of the neighbourhood support group would be an excellent way of starting to tackle the problem. Thank you.
Any questions? Doesn't seem to be any good. Thank you, Trevor. We're now into members' business. Public speaking time responses. We're sorry we cannot get the staff to move the item 8:10 further up, so we'll just hang in there. If you want to stay, you can stay, or if you want to go, you can go. We'll come back to you. Trevor, your issue, we will manage it as when we come to the COVID recovery, if you stay. Item 6B, leave of absence. Any leave of absence? No. Item 6C, matters of an urgent nature. I've not been informed of any. Mayor's report, you all would have got my very short Mayor's report. Can somebody move and second it? Moved by Councillor Compton, seconded by Councillor Sophie. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Thank you. That's passed. with your leave, I'm looking at item 8. Can I move the Paraparaumu Airport Waitangi Tribunal claims to 9 so we can get finished that, because I think we'll have a lengthy discussion about that one. Item 9. So can somebody move? I move there. Can I have a seconder? Councillor Buswell, all those in favour say aye. So item 8.1 has been moved to after item 8.11. Item 8.2, Annual Report 2019-20. Who do we have? Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good morning, everybody. We will take the paper as read. Key points to highlight is that last week, on the 24th of September, in terms of our process, we took the draft annual report to the Audit and Risk Subcommittee. It was at that meeting where the Audit and Risk Subcommittee went through the annual report, but also had 2 reports to consider from our auditors, Ernst & Young, which included the closeout report, as well as a report on control findings. During these 2 papers, our auditors did express no concerns with regards to our annual report to the subcommittee, and commended the staff on a job well done. So, Mr. Mayor, we will take the report as read, and between myself and Chris, we'll answer any questions.
Right. Questions? James Westbury.
I'm just reading the report on page, where is it? Page 32. It just says applications for central government infrastructure funding. And, I've been led to believe that, the Waitangi Library was part of one of those submissions, but clearly reading this, it certainly wasn't. Can somebody confirm whether the Waitangi Library was actually put forward as a application for provincial growth type funding or not?
Who's answering this question?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, it was.
You've got a subsequent question?
Can I just clarify? Not for the PGF, for Crown Infrastructure Partners shovel-ready projects.
Can I get a clarification of the Chief Executive? Because we had PGF and everything was working on that. And then we had COVID and then started changing. Am I right?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, through you. We were given 2 weeks to put in applications for shovel-ready projects, including over Easter, so staff worked non-stop for that 2-week period, put forward 11 applications, which included Waitangi Library and Mahara Gallery, amongst others. But you will recall that the rather longer-running PGF process, we hadn't put in much by way of application. We were working with the community on identifying priorities, which ultimately included the Gateway and the Link Road, but not much more.
And my recollection is that chunks of the Provincial Growth Fund became shovel-ready funds. Right. I have Councillor Elliott, and then...
Thank you so much for the report, and it's particularly pleasing photos this year around. They all match. I have a question more to do with process. Is it more easy before this report is accepted or after this report is accepted to make adjustments when it comes to our COVID response? For instance, we've just had a speaker speak about perhaps strengthening support for neighbourhood support groups, and yet we know that in the previous year funding for neighbourhood support groups was dropped, and was sent sideways, and they were joined up with other agencies.
Can I suggest
just ask
maybe in the
for-
COVID recovery one? I mean, I think that would be part and parcel of that, no?
Is it still? Are we still able to make adjustments, small adjustments like that, to our finances here into the?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no. You cannot make adjustments to the financials. The financials have been through a robust audit process. The only changes that can be made to the financials at this stage are from the auditors, or if there's been what's called a significant post-balance sheet event. So during the time period from the 30th of June 2020 up to the time where the council actually adopts the annual report, that is deemed to the period. If anything significantly happens in that period, which would impact the financials for the previous financial year, then you would make changes to the financial statements. Because we've been through a rigorous process with our auditors. They have done their testing, their substantive testing. They've made inquiries of staff. They've made inquiries of senior management. They have also indicated that they are prepared to issue a clean audit opinion, which basically says that our annual report is true and fair. We cannot go back and just make a change to the financial statements.
So the only changes we can make is to the full stops and commas.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct. It's minor editorial changes.
Councillor Hanford.
Kia ora. I'm just wondering if whether under the immediate response in the COVID section, it would be possible to make the point a little bit more clearly also around how the community supported each other during that time. We had over 500 people sign up to volunteer in support of their fellow community members, and as an outcome of that too, now we have a Kāpiti Student Volunteer Army, which just in relation to Trevor's point is still in operation for anyone who wants to use it. I still get an email at 5 o'clock every day with any orders that have come in, so that service, we've got a core team of 25 volunteers still able to do that for members of the community who might not feel comfortable leaving their home. So I think having some recognition of that kind of community response to the community under that immediate response section of COVID too, and also in the role that council played to support that, but just to recognise that that was also a part of the immediate response that council did play a role in through supporting community volunteers and groups, but I just think, yeah, giving that some kind of a light in there as well would be appreciated by people who did that work.
So this report's about council activities, so I'm wondering if that could be maybe part of the Mayor's foreword, that he personally acknowledges that community response if it's not appropriate elsewhere.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the short answer is if that's the will of the table, yes, it's an editorial change, and the paper does delegate or is seeking the council to delegate authority to the Mayor, the Chief Executive and the Chair of the Strategy and Operations Committee to make minor editorial changes to the annual report.
Would that be good? Thank you. I've got Martin Holliday, then James Westbury.
Two things, through you, Mr. Mayor. One, I give 100% support to Councillor Hanford's suggestions there. And the second one is Mr. Randall. Councillor Randall pointed out to me the shark on the documents. Page 167 has me listed as Mr. Councillor Mark Benton. If that could be corrected, please. Just under the community boards.
Are you sure you're not?
Yeah.
No.
Then I thought we fixed that.
Yes.
Huh? Just a small correction. Other than that, fantastic. Thank you.
James Westbury.
My question relates to page 73. It's in Parks and Open Spaces. It just talks about the operating and capital expenditure. There's a budget of capital expenditure about 1.4 million, yet so there's an underspend of 622,000. Is that going to be carried forward, or is that just from projects that didn't go ahead because of COVID? Because what's the...
So through you, Mr Mayor, thank you for the question. I don't have the exact details in front of me, but in terms of our process, so to be able to answer your question specifically, was it a result of COVID-19 projects not being done, or was it deliberately carried forward? In terms of our process, we can't just carry unspent money forward. We have to actually go through a process where we bring it to council. As part of the annual plan setting process, we seek council approval to carry over money. So when we get to the financial year, as is often the case, sometimes our expectations, we spend less than what we expected to spend, but we actually can't carry over more than what we've agreed with the council. So we will have to come back to you on that. I don't have the exact detail on that, but I think your question is, because there's a major underspend, do we automatically just carry that over to the next year? No, we can't, because we've already set the annual plan budget for the current financial year, and we have to live within that.
So just for clarity, it's just used to balance the books here, yeah?
No, it's not used to balance the books. So the annual report is actually just showing for each activity what was physically spent.
Yeah.
In terms of our process, as we start to do the annual plan processing, when we get into the third quarter of the year, we do start flagging to council what the likely outturn of the CapEx program is going to be, what we anticipate to spend. But sometimes the best judgments in the world actually don't turn into reality. So even the best forecasts, we might have unforeseen delays. So I think your question, if I've understood your question correctly, we've already tabled with the council what budgets we're going to carry forward from one year to the next. That goes into the next year's budget. This report is showing where we actually landed, and we don't automatically carry over unspent money. We don't add it to an already approved budget.
Okay, thank you.
Right, that ends question time. Recommendations, will somebody move 24 to 27? Councillor Janet Holbrow, seconded by Jackie Elliott. You want to...
Thank you. So I just wanted to congratulate the staff on this report, and also Mark touched on the audit reports, and the chair did highlight in the Audit and Risk Committee that these were excellent audit reports, not just a pass, but a pass with flying colours. And they also mentioned how easy it was to work with our council staff through that process as well. And informally afterwards, he did say that he's worked with a lot of councils and seen a lot of audit reports, and these ones were really up there. Independent chair, yeah. So thank you very much for an excellent report.
I'd just like to echo the comments made by Councillor Holbrow there. I work on these annual reports for the New Zealand Meat Board and Beef and Lamb New Zealand each year, and I'm just about to start that process myself as well. So you have all my sympathy for the pain that actually goes into this process, and all the things you have to juggle, and you're sitting there nervously waiting for the auditors, and you've got deadlines you've got to reach. So I think, yeah, the work that goes into this isn't widely understood, but it is a mammoth project, especially from a comms perspective. So I just want to express my appreciation for the work you've done, and it's a fantastic document. So you should both be the whole team should be really proud of it.
Right, anybody else? Right, just a word from me. Given the COVID challenges, it has been huge. So to get that kind of accolade from an independent chair and from around the table is actually very good. Thank you very much. Mr. Chief Executive and your team. You're surprised that the mayor said that.
No, very grateful.
Right, the recommendation 24 to 27 moved by Deputy Mayor Janet Holbrow, seconded by Jackie Elliott. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against? Carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr.
We're now on item 8.3, the COVID-19 recovery plan for Kāpiti. That'll be on your page 179. Yes. With Trevor's question. Natasha.
Morena, everyone. I'm here to talk about the recovery plan. With me is Mura Tamalatini, who's helped author the paper, and I've also got remotely connecting in Harvey Brooks, who many of you will remember has been supporting the work we've been doing to pull this all together from Martin Jenkins. So I'll kick straight into it. I've got a couple of things to highlight, and then I'm more than happy to take any questions. So as you know, the recovery plan has been in development for several months, and this plan is about setting a foundation for how we look to restore and rebuild the district following the COVID pandemic. It's really important to remember that the pandemic is not necessarily over as yet. As we were shown during August, it can pop up in different guises across the country, and we need to continue to be ready for that. Given this, there are still many uncertainties about how the pandemic and its impacts will unfold in our district, but what we are hearing on a national scale is that the impacts economically is likely to get worse before it gets better, and that's going to mean that there's social issues in our district that are going to get worse before they get better as well. So what we've done in terms of where to focus on the recovery plan, we've spoken to a range of people in the district, and we've pulled together a spectrum of thoughts and what people are seeing in terms of the impacts already, and getting ideas on different things we can focus on with others to support recovery of the district. We've anchored the recovery plan around a core vision, aims, and it's got some underpinning principles which you would have we have tested with you previously. These have been carried through to the current plan with some modification based on feedback we have received. We've split the actions that we're suggesting in the plan into across three different areas where they're anchoring the aims that are around reactivating our businesses and our economy, restoring our social wellbeing, and reconnecting our community. We've grouped the actions around 6 objectives, which has really been what we have been hearing is important to the community. There were many more ideas that were identified and suggested for inclusion in the recovery work, and we've had to do some really tricky work to try and refine and prioritise things. That has not been easy. There's more we would have liked to have added in there, but we also need to accept there's limited resources and budget constraints, and it's really important that we don't spread ourselves too thinly on this work. As it is, the recovery plan contains a fairly ambitious program of actions for the current year. And we've worked hard to fit these actions within the budget and resourcing constraints while also looking to strive to support the ambitions we've heard from the community. Just 2 more things I wanted to focus on. This work cannot be achieved by council alone. We will play different roles in different actions. There will be some that will be leading, coordinating and facilitating, and there will be others will be stepping back and supporting others to drive actions forward. But because many of these actions are reliant on us working with various stakeholders and agencies, as well as our iwi partners, the pace of this recovery work is going to depend on others as well as us. So we're realistic that this means that some actions will proceed faster or slower than others, and it's why we've committed to start the actions that are in the main table in the plan within the current financial year, but not necessarily to be able to have all of them completed. There are also some which are multi-year actions. So lastly, while this is a plan that we're seeking your approval for, we're very conscious that it's really important this is maintained as a living document, and we're able to change it and adjust it as the needs and as the pandemic and impacts that we're seeing in the community change over time. Did you have anything you wanted to add? No? Okay, happy to take any questions.
Right. Can I start the question by looking at paragraph 35, where you note that a further support package may be needed in case there's an escalation, we are back to level 3-4. And you say that no budget provision, given what we've gone through and the trimming that we've done previously, and what we're experiencing now because of the actions we've taken. I suppose this is a question to the Chief Executive, do we have a plan B that we know of? Or are we going to, in emergency, try to conjure up something if it happens? Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll start, and then Wayne can supplement my answer if he feels he needs to. So what we are conscious about, if that is a reality that we are faced with, it's likely that there will be a number of actions in the recovery plan which we've allocated budget to that won't be able to proceed in the way that we had intended, and that is part of how we can reprioritise things to look at further supporting the response.
So yeah, the conversation was around the fact that if we don't commit to start spending on recovery plans, we'll end up with a bit of money left over at the end if all goes well that we haven't committed and we won't be able to spend. So the conscious decision was, let's commit this stuff now, knowing that if things turn for the worse, we will have to do some very rapid reprioritisation. As Natasha's pointed out, some of those things will be self-evident, some of them will not, and of course some of it will depend on what response the government puts in front of us as well by way of funding and actions.
Just following up on that, would it be useful to give councillors some signals as to where the pressures would happen?
What would happen?
Yeah, so that we could at least know which are the areas that are open to reprioritization. I don't know whether I'm just...
In terms of the support parts of the
support
package that were most heavily used last time?
Or that would reprioritise?
That would pull out of the actions?
This is something to think about in terms of, I don't need an answer now.
Yeah. Can we come back to you on that, because it's a fair question, and we can sort of give some indications, but of course it's all based on guesswork in terms of how the impact might actually play out. But yes, we could come back and say we would see these things slowing down or stopping as we go into a response mode again.
I think the exercise will be useful even if it doesn't happen, because it does frame our mind in terms of what our actual basic priorities are, which are actually negotiable.
Yeah, certainly one thing we did notice through the resurgence in August was a lot of the social sector groups and organisations that we'd been working with in recovery were very focused on planning for a potential resurgence, and so it's quite likely that some of those actions that we've planned for recovery there would not be able to proceed, because at least the partner agencies and us would be focused on response again.
Right. Before I open the question up to Gwen Compton and Jack Lilly, I've got one more. Paragraph 50, you talk about a positive response to our distinct district identity. Do you have some kind of definition around what our distinct district identity is?
So that's from our long-term plan.
Okay. That's a very short. It's a very short, long answer.
Exactly. And we know you can quote it. There is currently work underway in the economic development team on work around how we're going to promote our distinct identity. I see Councillor nodding. So it's another one of those things that we would like to have done about a year or two ago, but. Yeah. There's a different focus on the way we'll use that, in my opinion, a slightly different focus, which is to promote the attractiveness of us as a place to live now as much as a place to visit. With COVID and people looking at the world differently, I think you'll see that coming forward in coming months, but I'm not sure exactly when.
So it's going to unfold. We look forward to that.
Yes. It's had many different suggested iterations in its history. So,
yes. Councillor Compton, then Councillor Elliott.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, just three questions from me. First, in terms of the concerns that were highlighted by Mr. Daniels this morning, is that something that we could cover off on page 195 under the Encouraging Connections and Kindness columns? It's got develop a recovery program to support community-led initiatives that help Kāpiti residents reconnect. Is that somewhere we could include that wording that specifically mention our old people?
Yes, absolutely.
And on that same page, under the strengthening partnerships and leadership, we've got engage with regional and national agencies to ensure the Kāpiti Coast objectives are considered and contemporary and future actions, establish direct relationships with government at a political and operational level, and promote new commercial investment opportunities across the Kāpiti coast. These don't strike me as new actions, these strike me as things that we should be doing as business as usual anyway. So I guess my question is, how is this different from what we're doing already?
So there's a couple of things in here. We have worked quite hard to get the actions in here aligning and dovetailing nicely with the economic development strategy. It's really important that those things are working in parallel and supporting each other. The other thing is, as we found with the impacts of COVID, it's exacerbated existing issues. So in that regard, it's not surprising that a number of these, the actions that we're focusing on here, are bringing forward or emphasising existing pieces of work or changing them in a way that makes them more tailored to better support recovery.
And one last one. So given the recovery plan is part of our sort of statutory emergency management framework that we work under, how does this interact with our long-term planning process that we're going into, given that this recovery plan is going to have a sort of 2 or 3 year time frame, but also this year's annual plan that we've also signed off, because obviously we're going to sign this off. It's going to potentially have an impact around some of the stuff we allocate there, is it?
Yeah. Yes, it will. So what we've done with the actions is, you'll notice that there's 2 different time frames, I guess, we've looked at the actions under. So the main one that you've been referring to, that's on page 195 of the agenda, are the actions that we're looking at progressing in the immediate financial year, the current financial year. At the back of the recovery plan, there's another suite of actions or initiatives that weren't necessarily seen as being ones which are important enough to get started right now, but they're ones that we want to put some further thought to and think about how we could shape these up as potential initiatives that would come forward for consideration as part of the long-term plan.
Councillor Elliott.
Thank you. I have a couple of general questions and a couple of not so general, but my first one would be, what funding is set aside there or earmarked for support for the arts and creative community?
So there are a couple of actions in there in particular which are targeted at the arts sector. So one of them under the Loving Local is there's an action there about supporting the Kāpiti arts sector to create artistic pieces, initiatives and programs that provide a holistic community benefit. It's on page 195. So that's one example of quite a specific one relating to the arts sector, and there are other initiatives which are more around kind of supporting the community to connect through a variety of events and activities that we've got, which absolutely the arts and creative sector is a fundamental part of in our district.
So further to that then, so what budget is set aside? Is there any budget set aside for the arts support of the arts community?
So you mean in terms of that specific initiative?
Yep.
So
and the one on 195. Yeah, and I really am talking specifics here.
Yeah, so that specific action which I mentioned before has got $20,000 set aside towards it. The Loving Local column. It's the second one from the bottom.
20,000. So 20,000 cost of implementation or contestable funding, or how would that be distributed, do you think?
We still need to be working that through exactly what that's.
Okay, thank you.
How that's going to be used.
My second question relates to job creation, and taken from and is aligning to the economic development strategy is the wish to focus on employment creation for the elderly and youth. However, up until the end of August, of the 11,000 people made unemployed in New Zealand, 10,000 of them are women. Yeah. Women and job creation for women is going to need investment, and it's going to affect Kāpiti as much as anywhere else. So can you talk me through how job creation specifically for women, which is not shovel ready, it's is going to be enhanced here?
Yes, so I know the figures that you're speaking to, and I have sought from the Ministry of Social Development some local breakdown of the gender split in terms of locally the unemployed people, and there was no significant difference between men and women, the number of men and women who've been made unemployed in Kāpiti. So yeah, which I found surprising given that national number. Yeah.
So on that, and I'm sorry, but my annotated agenda has disappeared and it's been replaced to an unannotated one. But what I did have a note on was that on one of the pages of your report there, it was a graph showing the statistical impacts of COVID on Kāpiti, but one of them was a regional figure given under housing. The need for housing, and I was wondering if there's any chance that you could update that with a district-wide figure.
So I'm not sure if you're talking about the infographics or the tables at the back. Oh, right, okay. So those are the ones that have been done. Yep, so those are the ones through the regional.
Yeah, I think there was that one. Some boxes on it as well. Yeah.
Oh, maybe it is that one.
Stats?
Yeah.
Yep. It says 145 families are on the social housing register in June 2020. Yep. So where possible, we will get district. We do want district stats. Obviously, regional stats don't give us the same story. So where we can get them at a district level, we always will. There are some that it's very hard to get data at a district level, but obviously where we can, we always will.
Okay, I'll keep looking for that annotation. Okay, meanwhile, the Mayor touched on something I wanted to bring up, and that is that although we are tasked to produce a recovery response plan, what we need to do is a resilience plan. This is the 6th or 7th in a wave of pandemics, and there will be many more, and they may be worse. And I would hope that it would be possible for us through this process to find a way and learn the lessons and record them, and so that the impacts of the next wave of a pandemic in 3 years, 5 years, whenever it happens, are less. And then further from that, the impacts are less. So it's about building a resilience plan. And I've had a really interesting example of this. Waikato Regional Council Group Recovery Manager changed the name of his response plan to developing a recovery plan to developing a team pandemic resilience plan. And he's actually put together overheads and everything about this and presented to his council, and they've adopted it. And it's important when we come to discussions like Trevor Daniel's elderly community there, who have many who are actually, the isolation is now producing reclusiveness, and that's very dangerous. And we're recognising that with Sophie's team of 25 people, their message isn't getting through at this point because the messaging seems to be stopped. The message is stopping about COVID tracing and contact tracing. Who the heck's bothering to do that anymore? And it's only a month. Yeah. So I think we need to talk about these things and about this being a resilience plan. A response.
Yeah, thank you. And I can respond to that in that before COVID, we did have with our emergency management work with REMO, we did have on our work program to develop up a sort of a template recovery plan of what recovery would look like in our district should we need to use it for any kind of an emergency. What we actually ended up doing because COVID came along was we've actually parked that to pick up after down the track once we've got this actual recovery plan targeted for COVID out of the way, and absolutely it'll be part of our plan will be to look at not just what we can learn from our own experience in developing this, but also looking at what other councils are doing around the country as well. So that's nice to hear that example.
Could I just add also, in terms of what the council's doing, resilience, as you'll know, having been around the table for particularly the last two long-term plans, resilience has been kind of a foundation of everything that we've been trying to do. And although it might not be a word that comes out much in this, it was an underpinning, I guess, thought that was there through this, that all of these actions will help to build the resilience of Kāpiti. And as the next long-term plan comes along, I'm sure it'll be a main consideration again, as it has been through the last ones as well. So it's definitely there in everybody's mind as we go through this, that it's really important to build the resilience within Kāpiti.
Yeah. Oh, look, thank you. And just to say that it's not all complaint at all. In fact, in that particular council, they went from having suddenly 120 social service providing groups and community groups and charities to 180 that they were trying to deal with and coordinate. And he was really impressed with the way we dealt with it here by centralising and doing it all out of our 0800 number and our team. Very impressed.
Are you done? Councillor McCann, then Councillor Holbrook.
Kia ora. It would be remiss of me not to say the word housing, and we'll come back to that. But first of all, thank you very much for a really, really good and comprehensive report. It's really good to see the on page 195 and the actions staying warm, healthy and safe. I do note we have an election at the moment, and even Barefoot and Thompson have come out and suggested to National that they don't overturn the healthy home standard. And I know that Kathy and I have been in one home very recently that a rental property that just did not meet any of those standards. So I wonder, and I've got several questions if it's all right with you, have we considered any work about educating some of our landlords about the effects of unhealthy homes in terms of dampness, coldness? We can return to that.
Yeah, I can't answer that off the top, but Janice may be able to pop up.
Sorry, Janice, I've thrown you under a metaphorical bus. Have we fixed housing yet? Have we... to scrap the healthy home standard?
There we go. At the moment, so you recall that the housing program report that you considered at the end of April included a series of actions, 7 of which you endorsed as being a priority for us to look at. Healthy home standards isn't specifically referenced in those actions. However, the council is already participating in a region-wide initiative around healthy homes. And certainly it probably speaks to the matter of quality, the quality of homes, and that is inherent in those recommendations. So it's not a specific action point at the moment, but we are working in that space.
Thank you, and I'm sure when we've got a comms, we'll be able to address whether any of those type of things need to be brought up and made more apparent. We also note that here, under the actions, we'll work with housing providers to address COVID-relating housing stress and homelessness. I know that Council have just had a meeting recently. Has anything come from that meeting with providers that should give us more concern about the community and COVID stresses in terms of housing?
So the meeting that you refer to was was between providers of emergency and community housing and the DHB and MSD and others. It was about trying to make sure that the likes of Mary's Guest House across the track, that is providing housing for people with usually a complicated set of needs, is receiving the right support and having the right connections into the relevant government agencies that can provide either services or funding for services to support that. I think that it was evident from that meeting that the very real challenges that already existed in this district for those people have absolutely been amplified significantly as a result of COVID.
And if I might just add on to that, it's just been drawn to my attention that there is an action which has inadvertently been omitted from the table that was provided here to you in the paper, which is about working with other funders to undertake a social and community impacts needs assessment for the Kāpiti Coast District, and we are putting some of the COVID funding in to support that work, which is happening as part of the housing program. Because of the importance of that impact, we are looking at allocating some funding towards that.
Thank you. That's one less question. Fantastic. Apologies. One of the other actions here is explore opportunities to use surplus land, Crown Council, iwi and others for affordable housing development, which probably brings into focus a conversation I've had with the CE and Mayor about what will happen to some of the land that we might dispose of. We had a discussion here in Council about land in Ōtaki that was not suitable for housing. And I don't want to quote the CE, but the words were something along the line, it might free up other opportunities for housing. I certainly at a later date would like to talk about ring fencing proceeds from sales such as that to ensure that it does go towards housing and not just paying down debt. But also we have the Paikokariki Housing Trust discussing with Council at the moment the sale of a property in Paikokariki. I wonder how the sale of that fits within that directive.
Very well. You need to line up your ducks before you make random decisions about things based on opportunities, basically. The last council committed to selling that property. It is not fit for purpose as a rental property. It is not up to the rental standards. Going back to your earlier question, it's the government's role to both regulate and enforce healthy standards for rental properties. We, like any other landlord, have to meet those standards. That property does not. The trust have been given nearly 2 years to come up with the funds to buy it, and that was what our commission was through the council, and have been unable to. And look, we've put them in touch with CHIPS and said, get your heads together and see if it's worth doing. The CHIP has said it's not. It brings us back to our underlying issue. One house at a time by this council using limited financial resources just won't solve the problem. We need to leverage our resources to the best impact, and that's what I've kept saying to this table. And that includes where can we best put our resources to step up to the mark and encourage the right housing developments to happen. And the starting point is to prove the need, and I do think that's the highest priority piece of work. Everybody we speak to in central government says, where's your need? We're building 13 houses, says Kāinga Ora. MSD only wants 40 from this district, and we all know, we strongly believe that our need is far, far higher, both in terms of numbers and the quality of the accommodation that we can offer. And so what we need to do is prove that need and then look at how we can take actions in collaboration with builders and developers to get the right typologies built in this district. And we're working on that every day with people to try and explain that to them. But they keep saying, show me the proven need. And so again, that is where we should spend our resources right now.
And just responding to that, that there is no disagreement with me that we need to prove our need, and that is the highest priority, I think, in our housing program. But time ticks on. We've had a report that could have told us that that was written last year, and I do think that we need to try and expedite this type of work as much as possible, because there are families right now that do not have homes over the head that are suitable to live in.
Councillor McCann, you're finished.
Oh, thank you.
Yes. I've got James and then Angela Baswell.
Both of us.
Yeah. Originally, there was a sort of mention in one of the drafts I'd seen about the Waitangi Library. Sorry, I keep harping on about this, but actually, I make no regret about doing it. Fast tracking the investment in the Waitangi Library helps with resilience of our community, providing a facility to provide some community cohesion, a sense of place. We know the economic development benefits. There was a 40% reduction in footfall at Waitangi Library. That's had a consequent effect in our business community also. So there's both social and economic benefits that are really clearly derived here, and that if it appears that that's dropped off this list. I'm quite surprised that that's not one of the projects that's recognised that could potentially be a fast-tracked project that could be used to facilitate growing our local economy, but also building community resilience.
Yes, I do understand that was one of the suggestions that had been made, and as I mentioned, there were many ideas which came forward, and we had to think very carefully about how we prioritise that. With the Waikalai Library, we know it's a really important priority for the community and for this council, and there is already work separately underway around that. And so from that point of view, we wanted to focus on things that have been quite significantly impacted as a result of COVID in terms of where we focus the actions in the plan. So I appreciate your comment.
The community has been significantly, given the age and demographic of our community, the elderly and the vulnerable are significantly impacted. And I think that statement actually underestimates the degree of social impact our community has actually had to face up to. We had somebody from the elderly describing the effect on our community, and it's significant. We see it every day. There's loneliness, like Jackie identified before. This is a really practical and sensible solution. I know you've got other work going on, but it actually just feels like that project goes down the list. I've seen our project push back and back and back over the last months, and it's actually getting quite frustrating, to be honest.
Okay, was the chief executive scratching his ear, or you putting your hand up?
Some would say that's a body language thing, isn't it? Mr. Westbury, I think it's absolutely right that you don't make any apologies for continuing to push for the library, advocate for it. And you've just heard Councillor McCann unashamedly pushing for more housing as part of what he wants to see more priority in. And of course, we come back to, that is always the challenge for this table, is to balance off all of those competing requirements, demands, wants, and at the end of the day, when it sets an annual plan, to make a decision about those relative priorities. When you give us a plan, we stick to it, or we try to. COVID gets in the way sometimes, or something else. So the plan that was agreed was how much work we would do to progress the Waitangi Library. We assured you there was enough funds to progress through those next steps, and that if more funding was needed, we would come back to the table and ask for it. So that plan progresses. Housing plan progresses, which is do the housing needs. I guess that the cautionary note I would like to lay on this table is to keep coming forward with one issue at a time and saying, can we change the plan for this issue, will automatically conflict with what was agreed with in the annual plan, and therefore put pressure on us, our ability to deliver in other spaces. And I want to add on top of that for the last 6 months, the COVID response, everything that this team has been doing was not on our plan. And yet it became effectively one of the number one priorities, response and recovery. So absolutely accept your point and welcome the ongoing advocacy for how important it is, because it is. But I stress that where we can, we need to stick to the plan and try and deliver it, or else everything falls over along the way.
Wait, no, I do want...
Yeah, at the risk of making the same kind of challenge. So, first of all, congratulations on this, and we have had some extensive workshops on this, and it's a beautifully well-rounded document, and I think it really covers a lot of concerns in our community. And I was at Whakarangatai Marae last night hearing some of the concerns around the Māori business community in particular, and certainly this provides a good focus on that. I'm just touching, I've got 3 issues to just touch on here. First of all, Mr. Daniel's point, and turning this into a question as my colleague Councillor Compton did, would it be appropriate to include that as a second bullet point under actions on page 209, where it says engaging with youth organisations to explore and identify youth wellbeing projects. Would it be, etc. Would it be appropriate maybe to put in engaging with our older persons organisations as well? So the other interesting conversation I had yesterday was around how an employee of WHENS was saying how they'd developed a regional approach through the whole COVID recovery, and it's not something that I'd thought of before, and I'd only, so I haven't brought it up earlier in this conversation. But have we looked at a regional approach to any of these kind of recovery issues? I know that there was a lot of work that went on regionally during the response phase. Is there anything that's happening to continue that regional approach into the recovery phase?
Yes, there is. So the regional recovery managers do meet on a regular basis, and there have been a number of initiatives separate to these ones, which have been agreed by the Mayoral Forum to be progressed on a regional basis. In addition to that, for a number of these actions, we'll be working with other territorial authorities and agencies in the region, and know that these issues are similar ones that are faced in other parts of the region as well.
Yes, and thank you. I think that's really great. And what I was hearing from that person was that there's this opportunity now that we've developed those connections not to lose them as we move forward. So following on from that, does that include advocacy? Because this report talks a lot about working with organisations and delivering local community outcomes. But what I'm hearing from organisations like Kāpiti Youth Support is that this is really stretching their organisations, and they need extra dollars. And bearing in mind what the Chief Executive said and how we need to stick with our kind of agreed budgets, but aware that there's this kind of extra funding that's available, what are we doing in terms of advocacy around recovery, and how is this reflected in this document?
So there's, as I mentioned previously, there are a range of different roles that we need to play in different parts of the recovery plan. Advocacy absolutely needs to be one of those, and I see that both as a district level in terms of advocating for our district, and to make sure that we're targeting the right funding opportunities. And the other one is, as a region, us coming together collectively to look at what we can advocate for with central government agencies. Both of those are really important pieces, and there are actions in here which are targeted at making sure we're building the right connections and relationships both within the district in a way that we may not have done so much in the past, but also making sure that we're making the right connections with different government agencies. And that needs to happen not just at a staff level, but also at an elected member political level as well.
Yeah. Because I think there's two kind of angles there. One is that we need to make sure that we're fully advocating for those service providers that operate within our district, so that we can bring those funds in to people that need it here, and also that we, as we enter the long-term plan process, that we have that front of mind as well as we look at our social investment allocations. So yeah, really keen to see how that progresses. So thanks very much, and thanks to Harvey as well here on Zoom for all the work that's gone into this. Thanks.
Buswell, then Councillor Hanford.
Thank you, and awesome to see it kind of encapsulated in one big document. My concern has been for a long time, particularly over those really harsh lockdown periods of our own staff wellbeing. We talk about the community and we talk about that quite intensively, but I know, and I followed many of our staff working pretty close to 24/7 over that period, and then once lockdown finished, everyone, not everyone, a lot of people in the community were quite jovial about being in lockdown and being on holiday, and I know that our staff worked really bloody hard. And then all of a sudden they have to play catch up to try and do their work as usual. And I'm just wondering what, from an employee perspective, are we doing to look after our staff and make sure that they are also kept well?
That's the Chief Executive.
perhaps in more detail for another conversation, but thank you for the question. It is a big concern, and look, the entire sector are talking about it. Last night I was talking to the Nelson CE, who we know quite well, and he said the exact same words that I think I would have said. He said, my team are exhausted. They feel like they've come through COVID. Adrenaline gets you through a lot of that. You get out the other side and you start to go down. And we said we're hanging on for Christmas. Because our community and our world kind of, not only do they want us to pick up what got dropped, they want us to accelerate it. Because quite reasonably, we lost a whole lot of way. We need to get things done. There are other priorities or other reasons why they're priorities. And so staff kind of feel a little bit like, oh my goodness, there's more. So we do all the normal things, but probably the most crucial thing is we're trying to figure out how staff can feel empowered to say, actually, no, that won't make us get there any faster right now, or no, not today, and here's why. So staff need to feel like it's just not, can you do more? It is, if I can stick to the plan, and I know what the plan is and what my role in that is, that will help. And then we're doing many of the other things that organisations try and do to get staff feeling like taking some leave when in fact I don't want to take holidays because where can I go? Which a lot of people have felt. So actually having to start saying, no, you do need to take leave because we're all getting a bit tired and a bit quicker to be grumpy. That's what we're seeing from the outside world as well. So really, really aware of it. It's actually not a simple solution, but the starting point is to talk about it a lot and make sure people feel like they can talk about it.
And on top of all that, you've got huge government legislation requiring massive changes.
Yeah.
Councillor Hanford.
Kia ora, just a quick question from me, but before I begin my question, I'd just like to acknowledge the work done around the section Greening Our Recovery, and also acknowledging the work of Low Carbon Kāpiti and the Kāpiti Climate Action Group to put that open letter together, which we tabled and now has really come to fruition in this document. So I want to thank you for that and also thank those two groups for their contributions. I think under the principles section, as I said, it's quite a minor question, but I think still important to raise, where you've got reducing our emissions and promoting the transition to a low carbon economy. I think maybe a more active word would be fitting in there, considering under the section on page 194, the Greening Our Recovery, you've got our approach, and there are some more active measures that would be taken to continue that transition that we are making to a low carbon economy, especially here in Kāpiti. So I think just a more active word in there would be appreciated and would really add to the already really awesome coverage that climate gets over this whole document. So thanks for that.
Councillor Elliott, and then I'll make sure your questions are very sharp. We are starting to sort of, because there are people waiting here. I want to move one of the agendas forward.
Thank you very much. To say that on page 197, I have found that chart. It refers to 29,000 special needs grants for food supplied in May and June for the Wellington region. I'm just wondering if we could have, please, a district-wide breakdown and also an ongoing breakdown from MSD.
Yeah, we can certainly see whether we can track down a district breakdown on that, and we'll be looking at providing regular information. MSD does have information on this available on their website, which is publicly accessible.
Right, the next one is exactly you, Kathy.
Hi, I'd just like to say that equity and health and wellbeing is top of my priority list at the moment. Councillor McCann has got a lot of the questions that I had, and I want to speak around housing. And I would like to see that the community boards have more input when you're going out into these groups with health and wellbeing and the housing issue, as I'd like to have some very serious conversations with MSD around how they're allocating housing. Some of our children in our communities are getting really sick because of the damp houses. I had a crisis call the other day and I've had another couple around housing. There's not much I can do about it. But when MSD allocate their housing, a computer spits out where they go. Now we have tangata whenua here in Kāpiti who want to stay in Kāpiti, but because they're not in but they could be allocated to Wellington, And I'd like to have a very serious conversation with MSD to say that if people, tangata whenua especially, and people in our communities, stay in our communities and not be disenfranchised from their families, because I send other people from out of town in here. So we have people in our own communities who are desperate for clean, warm, safe housing. And it's actually quite serious out there at the moment. It's ready to blow up.
That's been noted. Martin Holiday.
A lot of my questions have been covered, but just a few things. They actually seem a little bit minor now. But 13.4, page 180, just referred to the Kāpiti sports clubs receiving $146,000 from the Sports Resilience Fund number 2. The question I had, did KCDC assist in this funding process, or was it the clubs individually that did that themselves?
So I'm looking at Alison here to see whether she's able to answer the specifics of that question. I know we certainly did a lot promoting the existence of the fund. Alison, can you clarify what level of support we provided? Thank you. That really just was up to date with what they could apply for. We did give some advice around it, but they were responsible for doing their own applications.
Do we have a database for clubs in the Kāpiti Coast?
We have relationships with because they're on our reserves, but we do have a full database.
Nope, just waiting for it to go red, which it just did then. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I hear there's a lot of work, and it's a lot of really good work being done in response to recovery and all that sort of scenario. But what I haven't really seen anything of here is work done in regards to an action plan around if there is a resurgence of COVID. So, is there an action plan? And, do we learn lessons from moving through to levels 3 and 4 last times, and what lessons were learned from that and built on? Do we have a plan in place around that?
Yes, there has been significant work done on developing a resurgence plan, both for the region at a regional level, but also locally as well. So we feel that we're prepared if there was a case to be identified in Kāpiti.
I suppose the question actually is, may the councillors get a briefing sometime on that? Would that be right?
Yes.
The question,
sorry,
but when
I had
you got some more
questions there. Sorry. Just in regards to the budgeting, with regards to reprioritisation, I'd be interested in Mr. Macklaw's comments. I guess it's a bit of a moving target, to be honest, but if our reprioritising of budgets isn't agile enough, do we have leeway there to borrow funds if required, if there is a resurgence and we do need extra funding around that, or do you think it would be required? Or do you think we have the capability to manage that within the parameters we currently have?
The question is, can we borrow billions?
Sure. What credit rating do you want? No, we can't. Sorry. We have quite limited headroom, but we are not in the situation of councils like Auckland who were already at their limits and due to loss of revenue impacted both ways. So I'm not sure. I might have missed. Was there a specific part of that question, or? Yeah, for resurgence. So again, Kāpiti, fortunately for us, was amongst the least affected. The uptake, for example, of the most significant thing that would have in fact impacted our debt in the short term, rates deferrals, payment later, was very low. And our revenue streams, what has always been our weakness, which is mostly rates revenue, arguably became a strength because we didn't lose non-rates revenue that made such a big impact on our revenues. So long story short, our ability to borrow is more or less unchanged today compared to what it was pre-COVID. But every circumstance will have to be assessed on what it puts in front of us, because what we all know is if we were Europe, we'd be talking about a whole different scenario economically and for households than what we've been fortunate enough to be through. So I don't know if that helps much, but Or Queenstown, absolutely.
Any more?
Yep, just two more. Page 180, 13.2, referred to the War Memorials and Town Halls Fund that we had, I think 16, I think I read somewhere, various levels of funding that came through for that, which is absolutely fantastic. I was just curious, was the Waitangi Beach Hall considered in this, just based on what was talked about by the Waitangi community earlier?
So I was just trying to get a nod or a wink from Ian as to whether or not he knew whether that met the... It wasn't, so it didn't meet the criteria. Yeah.
Didn't meet the criteria. Okay, we need to find out what that is. And just endorsing some comments that were made, look, on the actions, youth and Māori are covered very well with regards to growing skills and capabilities, but I did note no mention of mature people, and that's across the board, which will have an issue in that 45 plus category with regards to redundancy and jobs loss. Just having perhaps something, I don't know, some wording there that reflects that, and I think it's actually perhaps been covered up in the senior side of things, that there that is something that's going to be forthcoming as well, which will need to be addressed.
So if I can just comment, the reason we've focused heavily in on both Māori and youth is that what we understand is that's where the impact of job losses and the greater difficulty in finding re-employment, and so that's why we've specifically targeted several items around those particular groups, but most people will benefit from the initiatives in that column.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Paraparaumu.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm just following up on Councillor Halliday's question. So the question was that the comment was that the Waitangi Beach Hall didn't meet the criteria. What sort of criteria did it have to meet, please?
War memorials and sculptures and halls. Yeah, so memorial halls. So so it wouldn't have got over the start line. We would have put it forward if it had.
Thank you.
Okay, no other questions. Will somebody move recommendation 59? Move. Councillor Holbrook, seconded Councillor McCann. You want to do this? Leave it. Okay. Open for debate. Anybody else? No. I'm going to put the motion 59. Oh, Martin.
I'm just going to refer to some bits and pieces in this document, and it's wording, really. I won't give page references as such. It states we need to be ready to adapt further, to be agile, caring for communities governed by regional leaderships, involving a range of health and welfare agencies, but also local government, expected to take a lead role in both recovery and resurgence response and focusing on the long-term well-being of the community. Many parties need to be involved in Kāpiti district recovery. The word strengthening, positioning, leadership, ongoing efforts around coordination, integration, such words as relationships, community-led actions. In my role as a councillor, we are elected as community leaders. That's my interpretation. And this has been focused with portfolios. I'm in the embarrassing situation of not being able to inform my community constructively on the welfare team and the current preparedness for a resurgence. I do not know what is happening in the space, which has severely hampered my participation in working with my community. And for me, this is not acceptable as portfolio holder for health and seniors. I note Councillor Buswell was very well engaged with in her portfolio roles with regards to the whole process, both through COVID and in the recovery aspect of that. And I would like that addressed, please.
Anybody else? Councillor Bernie Randall.
I just wish to endorse what Councillor Halliday said. And I don't know if you can tell me if I'm out of order, Mr. Mayor, but there was a YouTube video of the Mayor wearing a mask, telling everyone, which is a good public health matter. But again, I thought it should have been under the portfolio leader's role. He could have taken the lead role in that. Anyway, I'm basically just supporting what Councillor Halliday said.
Can I just respond to that? That request was made by the chair of the regional council of all the mayors, but all of us can wear the mask. I'm just saying. some can wear more masks than others. That's true. Right, so recommendation 59, moved by Janet Holbrook and seconded by Rob McCann. Reply.
Yeah, I'd just like to congratulate the staff again and to our contractor as well for the excellent consultation that went on through this process with a lot of stakeholders in the community and ourselves as well, if we requested that. I had a very good discussion about some of my concerns. In terms of a resurgence, maybe we could have a little update on that at a separate time. Right now we're talking about recovery, and I hope that some of Councillor Halliday's concerns can be addressed at that time. Thank you.
I'm going to move agenda 810 up now because people from Nahapo Otaki have been waiting for some time. Can we do that now, please? And that's on. Page, that's on page 348. We should take a break, eh?
Yeah, if you would like a break, but
Hmm.
you're a bit stuck on the way.
Yeah.
Right, kia ora koutou. So this is the annual alcohol licensing report for 2019 and 2020. I know there's some conversation to have around this, but if it's okay, we'll take this particular report as read and then move on to the questions.
Can I start by asking a question on page 351 on paragraph 12? This is the form that you've responded to the Alcohol Regulatory Licensing Authority. I'm looking at 12B. And the answer that you've got there for all A, B, and C is in bold at the bottom there. The inclusion of deliveries from bottle stores has an essential service during level 4 and 3 may not have been consistent with the achievement of object of the Act. What it doesn't cover is whether there are any other comments that you want to make in terms of B, the harm caused by excessive or inappropriate consumption of alcohol should be minimized. That is more a generic question, not particular to the COVID. But you haven't responded to that. I think I'm just asking the question.
Yes, so this is for the District Licensing Committee to respond to, and we didn't get a direct response to that particular question. So it's not for staff to make the response.
So that's the committee's response, and the committee hasn't responded fully.
Yes.
What do we do then?
Present the report with the information that we have from the District Licensing Committee.
Angela Buswell.
I just have a question around the local alcohol policy. We did have it in our work program last training, I remember it, and it got bumped down. When will that be coming to the surface again? Do we have an idea on that?
I'm not sure of the exact date, but when we regularly bring forward the policy work program, that's the opportunity. 26th of November, I'm told. So maybe quite specifically, then you can have that opportunity. I guess you know that we'll be saying that's cool. Please tell us what drops. Yeah. But
Councillor Halliday.
I will actually wait till Councillor McCann's spoken, if that's all right.
Councillor McCann.
That's ominous. I just have a question following up briefly on your question, Guru, which was the answer was that the staff wrote to the DLC. Can I have a date on when that occurred? Because I haven't seen that, and it may have occurred prior to becoming the chair?
Yes, because it was for last year, and a email was sent to the district licensing chairperson. I don't have the date, but I can provide you with a copy of the email and follow-up phone calls.
Thank you for that get out of jail card.
Councillor Holiday.
The situation we have where we are unable to view liquor licence applications and those processes, is there facility within council to allow that, or is that something that has to go through the district licensing agency itself direct?
So just to give you an idea about the role of the Chief Alcohol Licensing Inspectorate at Kāpiti Coast District Council or any territorial authority, what we do is we receive a alcohol application, and the Ministry or Medical Officer of Health and Police and Council or Chief Alcohol Licensing Inspector consider the application, and it's evidence-based. And we also, the applicant has to publicly notify it, so we also receive on occasion objections to applications for alcohol licences, and then it's up to the Kāpiti Coast District Council to take it to or recommend it goes to a district licensing hearing and basically represent in our literature that we send to the District Licensing Committee the objections to any of the applications that we might have received, and then it's up to the Independent District Licensing Committee to have that hearing and consider any of the objections and also consider any objections that might have come from Ministry of Health or Medical Officer of Health and Police.
So I guess we've heard, and this has been an ongoing issue, I've seen this in many community board meetings, around people not being aware of who is applying for a liquor licence, not talking about managing renewals or anything like that, a little bit new licences, but I guess renewals as well, because if there are issues, that's the opportunity to address them. Is there a way that we can list are we able to list those sorts of things on our website as such? I mean, I know that it's in the newspaper, but is there an ability to do that? And so maybe the community boards could keep an eye on that as such? I know it comes through the EMB, but it's something that perhaps the public wants to perhaps be aware of as well.
I'll get Democracy Services to respond to that.
We're currently looking at how we can put all of those applications, the entire application pack up on the website, and that will remain up on the website until the matter is dealt with. So that includes during the objection period and afterwards, so people can go in and see those. We're looking at whether we can send out an email subscription system so people are advised as that list is updated, but we're just working through the IT with that at the moment. So it's in hand.
The other thing, I hope that answers the questions there, that this is actually in process of being resolved, ongoing. Also, just wanted to comment on page 351.12 C, where to what extent, if any of you consider the achievement of the objective of the Act may have been affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. Although, and this is sort of contrary to what we were just talking about, the inclusion of deliveries from bottle stores as an essential service during levels 4 and 3 may not have been consistent with the achievement of the object of the Act. I'm just wondering whether something needed to be said that I personally think it was essential, because we have certainly a lot of elderly people and a lot of people that are reliant on alcohol. The right or wrongs of that being irrelevant to my opinion, in a situation of crisis where people are isolated, the lack of being able to get alcohol could lead to more issues than not. And I wouldn't want a general consensus be going out that to sort of like wanting that, or not supporting that. I appreciate that from the start of liquor perspective, we can't support it, but I think from a holistic approach to the well-being of our community, I would not like to see that sentence be detrimental in that space.
Councillor, I'm sure the new chair is listening very closely, given, as you just heard, it's the chair's comments, not staff comments, so we can't rewrite it, but I'm sure he's listening very carefully to that.
I just think we do need to be cognizant that there is case law that we follow, there is actual law that we follow in a process, and that, for your information, all of these documents come before the chair, who then reads them thoroughly, I tell you, thoroughly, to make sure that everything is ticked, etc. And it is actually the DSC chair who can, even when the documents come on the papers to be signed, can actually bring up a matter that can then put the whole thing on hold while we go and do some investigation, or in fact do a hearing. Am I correct, Democracy Services, in saying that? So that there can be an application that on the face of it has the boxes ticked, and there can be things that still need to be unearthed. And I say that having sat through a number of training sessions where there are things in play within New Zealand, such as the use of immigrants and binding them into establishments, which has come to the attention of DLCs throughout the country. So there's a good deal of work, but what we can't do is go outside the law and the case law unless you create a local licensing regime, and that is clearly something that DLCs prior to me have been advocating for, and something that, as our Chief Executive has talked about, is on the agenda. And that is the point at which we can deal with some of the issues that are outside the purview of what the DLC can actually deal with.
Before you, Jackie, can I just ask this question? We have a fixed number of people on the legal licensing committee. Do we have a portfolio of people who can fulfill that according to the hearing, or do we have a fixed number?
It's probably actually better for Democracy Services to respond to that.
The question I want to ask is whether any of those are Maori.
Okay. So, in answer to that specific question, no, or not that I'm aware of. There is a panel of people that we select from. I think there's 5 people in total that we can select from. It is within the council's ability to appoint further people to that panel.
Okay. Sorry.
Here, a housekeeping issue. I'm still getting requests as a district licensing chair to file annual and quarterly reports, and the most recent correspondence is from Robert Smith, case manager for the Tribunals unit, with regard to this case. It's a request for evidence, so can we catch up with that later? Thanks.
Sure.
Right, any other questions? No? Otherwise, can somebody move recommendation 19 on page 349? So moved. The Mayor moves it. Can I have a seconder? Councillor Elliott. Any debate? No. Just a word. I just want to give thank you for the concern that you've raised in Otaki. We have raised a number of questions. The issue, I suppose, is we've got a legal tick box to go through, but the avenue to influence that through this whole process is a local alcohol policy, and that's in the work stream, I believe. Councillors may want to consider when and where you want to move that further. Councillor Elliott. Any reason for that? Councillor Randall seconds it. So all recommendation 19 moved by the Mayor and seconded by Councillor Randall, that the Council receive the report and appendices. All those in favour say aye. Those against? Carried. We now need to take a break. I'll come back at 12:30. Thank you very much.